Hey church, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We have a special guest today, Tyler Steele, that I've been wanting to introduce you to for a long time now. This is kind of a long time coming, so thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Some of you know that about 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we started talking with David McKinnon, which you know, as a part of our church, about bringing the possibility of bringing his group over, his AA group, Alcoholics Anonymous, to our church, and our church providing the meeting space for that. Well, so Tyler is actually the person who started the group, 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
It was 3 years ago, yes.
3 years ago, okay. So, and the name of the group is called AAWOL. It's a good name, a good acronym. It's Alcoholics Anonymous Way of Life. You have an amazing story, which I want you to share with our folks. They need to know it. They want to know it. And your story actually involves David McKinnon, who we know in our church community, but we don't often get to see this particular side of David that you're going to talk about, because I know your story. So, greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I know it's a rough story. It's really gritty. It's down to earth. It's honest. It's vulnerable, and you're an amazing guy to be so vulnerable with so many people. So I'm gonna kind of hand it over to you and share with us your testimony of where you came from and how you ended up years later starting your own group.
Okay, well, I am Tyler, and as we say in AA, I'm an alcoholic. So I guess from the beginning, I started my drinking career when I was a teenager, and ultimately never really stopped until. There's a lot of guys. There's a guy that I know who says it just like this. He's like, I went out to a party when I was a teen, and I didn't come back until I was 30-something years old. And That's basically what happened with me. I just never stopped. It started out fun, and it eventually led into a lot of isolation and homelessness for me. That's where my drinking brought me. I spent about 4 to 5 years without a home. I was on the streets. I slept in trailers. I slept on friends' couches. I slept wherever. I slept in empty houses. I slept in laundry rooms, wherever I could find a place to stay warm. And it's just the drinking and the using that was in my life brought so much shame and guilt to my life that the only thing that I could find to completely bury that was alcohol. And I didn't want to feel shame or guilt or misery anymore, and alcohol solved that issue for me, And I would have kept doing it forever, but what happened is the morning always came, and there it comes again, the shame, the guilt, the misery, and I just washed it all away.
Within other recovery communities too, not just alcohol, but we talk about the issue of there's shame and guilt there to begin with, but then with the further drinking causes more shame and guilt, which then causes us to drink more within
layers and layers and layers.
And then we just keep spiraling down
and eventually the things that you care about the most, they become in your way. I didn't lose my family or the things that I cared about the most. I sacrificed them. I gave them up because I needed to bury that shame and guilt. I needed to be able to get rid of it somehow. And they were just reminders of it. And I left. I wound up in jail. I think I went to jail, a good 12, 13 times within a 4-year span. The longest period of time was 3 months. I was in and out of jail a lot. And towards the end, I actually welcomed the idea of jail because I was homeless and I just needed somewhere to stay where I can eat and be warm. And jail was actually a comfortable idea to me at that point. So I was almost thankful when I get pulled over for a warrant or something and they're like, you're going to jail. And I'm like, you know what? sounds good to me, actually.
Yeah.
Like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
So those were my only brief moments of sobriety, was when I was in jail. But, you know, I'm stuck in there, shame and guilt, isolation again. I don't talk to anybody.
And you said you had been on the streets for how long? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
towards the end there.
Okay.
And so the last time I was in jail, I came out, and I had this idea that I was just going to clean my act up together, and you know, I was going to get my life together and figure things out, and that lasted about a day. And
Okay.
I was back at it, and I tried to visit my kids, and I tried to visit my kid's mom and see if, you know, I could be welcomed back into her house, and that was a hard no. And I just turned back to the streets, and it was just devastating.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had had a chance to maybe, because we were both in this homelessness kind of thing together. She was in and out of shelters. She had just gotten a place. And while I was in jail, I'm like, great, I get out of here. I get to have a place to stay finally. I get to stop doing this. And she's just like, enough's enough. You got to go.
So what was the turning point in your life that changed things?
So that was my bottom, really. I was faced with homelessness once again. Like, I had nowhere to go. She was my only comfort at that time. My kids were my only comfort. The only thing that I had left that was any kind of good in my life was that, and now it's gone. And I'm back to homelessness. So, and I've pushed everybody out of my life. My drinking was isolated drinking. I sat behind places. I sat in bedrooms by myself, and I just wanted to drink alone. I didn't want anybody to be near me.
Yeah.
So when I left that day, I wound up behind a Winco store next to a dumpster, and I just sat back there, and I mean, I was miserable. I cried. I just hated myself. I hated everything. I thought I was convinced that I didn't deserve, or I wasn't worthy of being a, you know, functional person anymore. Like,
Wow.
This is my life. I will never be any different than this. I will always be this. I will always be miserable,
Yeah.
shameful, and just riddled with guilt.
Yeah.
I made one phone call.
Okay.
I called my mom, and she had gotten sober. She had been in AA for a while, and she had learned to basically tell me, here's where you can go to get help, instead of just giving me money or a place to stay like I wanted.
Yeah.
And she did that.
You were asking her to rescue
Yeah,
you,
I was just,
and
I
she
wanted,
wasn't rescuing you.
I was like, you don't understand. I just want money or a place to stay. That's
Yeah.
that's how I can be saved right now.
Yeah.
She knew, you know, this program. She's been in this program. She's had her own struggles, and she said exactly what I needed to hear. She just gave me a phone number, and she said, call this person. Again, I'm going to give you this phone number. If you want to get help, if you want to get out of this, call this person. And I knew the phone number. She's given it to me before, and this time I finally called. And this Southern speaking gentleman picked up the phone and was like, hello. And that's your friend David.
We know that Southern speaking friend, yes.
So David picked up the phone, and I said, hey, you know, I was crying. I was a mess. And I was like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I asked my mother for help, and she gave me your phone number. And I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to use anymore. I don't want to drink anymore. And he's like, are you drinking right now? And I said, no, not right this second, but you know, I'm drinking today. And he's like, where are you at? And I said, I'm sitting behind a Winco with like nothing. My life had basically, like, all that I had left in 34 years of living was a plastic bag with useless things. I was 50 pounds less than I am now, which is, if you can believe that.
Okay.
And I had no teeth. All my teeth were cracked, missing. I mean, I was a mess. I was an addict. I was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And so he said, wait right there. I'm gonna come pick you up. I said, okay. And I still was so, like, I had so much anxiety about meeting another person.
Yeah,
even,
yeah.
you know, I just didn't want to even face anybody. So I
Yeah.
hid in these bushes. And, you know, I was trying to decide if I was actually going to do this or not. And then all of a sudden, you know, David comes pulling around. He goes around like 3 times, and finally I step out of the bushes, and he's like, there you are. And
Wow.
David.
And David's the kind of guy that he can make you feel really comfortable,
Yeah.
really loved very quickly.
He talked to me right away. He said, you don't have to think about anything that's going on. You don't have to think about, I started listing off all the, because I mean, there's this monumental mountain that I'm looking at that I need to climb just to get back to functional person.
Yeah.
And I'm just listing these things off. He's like, stop, stop. You don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah.
Let's just get you a bed. Do you have any food or any money? I'm like, no. And he's like, okay, let's go to the grocery store. Let's get you a little bit of food. And let's get you a place to sleep. And, we can talk about these things tomorrow, and we can just take it day by day. And I mean, I was so grateful for that. He put a little bit of, he gave me a little bit of food, gave me a spot to put it, showed me where my bunk was, and I just threw my stuff down, and I was ultimately broken. I laid on the floor, and I was just a mess. And he sat there and he talked to me for like a good half hour, an hour, just about everything. And then later on, he was managing the house at the time. He brought me to my first meeting. He introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is what I needed. I needed somebody I trusted to be able to step foot in one of those. This is the first time I've been around more than a few people at a time in my life.
Yeah.
So I needed to hold his hand and go in there, right?
Just to get there.
I mean, I'm like a dog with my tail stuck between my legs, and like I'm just ashamed of myself. And my first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous, I fell in love with it. I realized that I wasn't alone. That shame and guilt was shared among a wide variety of people that are just, doctors, lawyers, homeless people. I mean, there's just people I would have never thought I could have a connection with share the shame and the guilt that I lived in for so long.
Yeah.
And I was able to connect to him right away. I saw God working in that room immediately. I saw a power that I could not ignore.
Yeah.
And I just kept coming back. And David just said, just keep going back.
Just keep going.
I just kept going back. And until I just fell in love with it.
And this was, and how long ago was this?
This was August 2016.
Okay, so you're coming up on your
4-year
sobriety mark in August, and your life has completely changed in the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. You're with a beautiful young lady. Mm-hmm. You're with your kids. Mm-hmm. You have a job. You started. Not only did this bring you out of where you're at, but you started your own group,
right?
Which was how long ago?
That was March 2017. I had been sober for I think almost 6 months when that started.
Okay.
Yeah. So at about 3 months, I also fell in love with the sober house that we lived in with and all the guys there, the camaraderie there, and all of us are doing the deal and getting work done and on ourselves and so I noticed that we didn't really have like an in-house thing going on very much. We just would go to meetings all over the place, all over town. So that's where the idea came up. Like, why don't we do our own thing? Let's have a book study meeting every Tuesday and Sunday here at the house.
Sure.
So that caught fire, and we got so much out of those house meetings that we did.
Yeah.
And then a buddy of mine was like, we should bring this out to something else. Let's just bring it outside of the house.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh.
So this is the birth of AAWOL.
The birth of AAWOL, yeah. So George, another guy who's a member of AAWOL, he's very involved in this church. And I went to him first, and I said, what do you think about bringing a meeting into that church?
Yeah.
And this was Shepherd's Gate Church. And he said, I'll ask. And so he went and introduced the idea to them. They wanted to meet me. So I arranged for a sit down with them, with the pastors there and a couple other people from their church. Yeah. And we met. It was just me and them, sat down, had lunch with them, and I told them everything I know about AA and everything I've learned and everything I want to do. Yeah. And after that lunch, they gave me the keys to their church, and
it's crazy.
I sat in my car and I was just so emotional. I was like, I was sitting behind a dumpster 6 months ago. Yeah. And now these church members are going to let me start an AA meeting to help other alcoholics. Like, I would have never guessed that would be my story, ever. But
let me ask you, one more question, just for time's sake. How's the meetings been going since they're on Zoom? Because we're in the COVID era.
Yeah, we got to do one meeting here,
Uh-huh.
and then just before we were able to get our second one down, this all went down, and we started on Zoom right away. Actually, I heard about Zoom from another person, and I jumped on there right away. I put the message out there to some of the groups that I'm involved in, and we got Zoom going right away. And I actually chaired that first meeting because there wasn't even time to find another person, so I was like, I'll just do it.
Sure.
And shared my story, kind of like what I just did now. And
Yeah.
and yeah, we started Zoom. That first one, we were a very early group to start Zoom.
We can't wait to have you guys back in the building. We can't wait to have you be a further blessing in this neighborhood.
Thank you.
It is just awesome. Thank you so much for sharing
Absolutely.
your story. I actually would like to just say a brief prayer for you.
Of course.
Church, would you mind, I know this is recorded, but God doesn't need time. He doesn't pay attention to that stuff. So would you just pray with me very briefly for Tyler and for this AA group that's going on in our building. Father, I ask for your blessing on Tyler's life. I ask for your blessing on his family, and I ask for your blessing on this group. I ask for your blessing for the other leaders. I pray that you would use this group in ways that you want to, and I pray that you would show Tyler the path to walk down. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Tyler.
Amen.
Thank you, church.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.